In today's artist review, I would like to talk about the work and life of Imogen Cunningham. And I'm sure most of you already know her work and very familiar with her as an artist, but I think it's very, very important to introduce you guys to more female photographers who were in the beginning of the photography as a field and helping establish the female point of view in photography and contributed into the field as photographers and especially as female photographers. So she was born in 1883 and passed away in 1976. So most of her photography career was happening in the 20th century, but she started very early. She established her studio in 1910, not so long after her graduation, and she graduated actually with a chemistry degree, but chemistry specifically in photography, and she was developing a lot of chemical processes for specifically printing. And so in 1910, she opened her own studio in Seattle, which I find pretty remarkable. It's 110 years ago, and she already had her own photography studio. In 1913, she published an article titled Photography as a Profession for Women. And I find that also very, very important in the history of photography and female photography. And in that article, she was talking about she was encouraging more women to go into this profession and finding themselves as photographers, which is really quite remarkable. And so when she started her career, her photography career, I think while she was even at university, she was photographing a lot of plants and flowers. And it may sound very easy, and I'm sure you've also seen these pictures of hers, but to me, it's not easy at all because you need to find, the way of showing those flowers in the most artistic way as a subject, not as just a point and shoot kind of moment, like your grandma photographing her flowers in her garden. How to find that completely opposite way of approaching the subject, more of an artist, right? So it's her lighting, it's her treatment of texture. So you can see that her flowers and plants, they appear more like sculptures rather than just that documented kind of flower as an object. So she turns them into something else with the lighting and with the camera angle and the close-up position of the camera, and you can see all these beautiful textures and these shadows, the play of the shadow and the light and the composition. So it's really something that makes you think of something else, like the sculptures, like maybe even some human shapes and forms and elements. And that was her artistic approach that she also applied to other subjects. So for example, she was fascinated with hands, and she photographed hands a lot. And so she would combine all these elements of, again, the light and shadow, and rendering them as these beautiful shapes. And then you can see that some of the flowers that she photographed, they look like fabrics, or they look like maybe some human body shapes and elements. And for example, this one is so beautiful and is so soft. That light is so soft and tender. And so you see more than you usually see when you look at a flower. And that same approach she carried on to her other subjects, like this human body forms, um, abstracting them and turning them into all these beautiful shapes and textures again with the help of the light, but also the camera, the framing, that position in the camera. So beautiful, beautiful shapes, turning them again into the sculpture-like elements, and focusing on textures and forms. And I think she was one of the first photographers who really turned into nude subjects and was able to show them in a very, very artistic way. And what I think is very important is that it was a female point of view and a female um, way of showing another female body, although she photographed a male body as well. And so I think her point of view as a female was slightly different than of a male photographer. And I really like that um, fascination with the form and the shape and abstraction. So she was trying to abstract and turn those shapes into something else, and that's a very important artistic endeavor for me. And then she collaborated with dancers and specifically with Martha Graham, a famous dancer of the 20th century. And she photographed her a lot on stage and off stage, and her really emotional expressions, close up of her face, but also of her entire body. And I think she also stayed true to herself as a photographer, as looking for that shape, that texture, that form, that again maybe an abstraction with an emotion in it. And although these images are nude, they are not necessarily selling that sexuality and the female body in that way, but they again are talking about the form and the emotion through the form, the texture in the skin, and the shape in general in the composition. And then, like I said, she photographed full body and the movement and the dancing element of it. And thanks to those images, they were published in Vanity Fair, and then she was invited to become a photographer, a full-time photographer for Vanity Fair. All these other images that I showed you, she created in San Francisco, and where she was a part of F64 group, founded by Ansel Adams, as you probably know. And then when she was invited to work for Vanity Fair, she moved to New York, where she photographed some again dancers and fashion and portraits for the magazine. And at some point, she found herself more interested in documentary and even street photography, and she turned into more sort of traditional portraits, but also in her own way. So this is an example where she photographed children of, I think it was her family and someone else's children, also viewing them in this, even though very emotional, sort of interesting moment, engaging moment of children engaged in this game, but also paying attention to the same shapes and textures and juxtaposing their body textures to that rock texture that, she found that interesting moment. And then she photographed more traditional portraits, but the subjects are quite interesting. And again, her attention to light, to shapes, and to details and textures is also very extraordinary. And these portraits are they seem incredibly contemporary and incredibly inspiring. And one of the last subjects that I wanted to show you is this extraordinary woman, all covered in tattoos. And also, I wanted to end with a quote that when she talked about her approach. She said, "I don't hunt for anything. I don't hunt for things. I just wait until something strikes me. Of course, I hunt for an expression when I'm trying to photograph people." And I think it's a beautiful way to describe your own approach, because sometimes we get caught in that urge of, find something, and we really need to go and hunt and hunt and hunt, and it becomes mechanical in a way. And I think when you approach your subject more organically and you just wait for the moment to happen, there's something beautiful in it. And of course, she talks then about it subject expression that is really, really important to her, and then she waits for that expression to happen. But I think that hunting aspect that she mentioned, I think I can relate to it as well, that you need to let it go at some point and just immerse yourself in the scene, in the moment, and just let it happen. So yeah, I hope it was an inspiring review, and maybe you will go back and see more of images of Imogen Cunningham and explore her work, and her biography and her life was also very inspiring. So if you want to see more of these videos, see my other links in the description, and please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.